Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast. Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Marc Waters, the MD of UK, Ireland, Middle East and Africa from HPE in the virtual studio. How are we doing, Marc?
Well, Marc, good morning. I'm doing well, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to the podcast. You know, this is my first podcast.
Is it? Well, it's the only podcast, Marc, for the IT channel. So, you know, we're famous now. So so thanks for coming. So I did have, last year I had Lewis and Marc on. We had a round table event. So that was good. So those guys came on. So you were highly recommended to get on.
You had Lewis and Marc. So that sounds like you couldn't quite afford Ant and Dec.
Yeah, they were good actually. They were good. I like Lewis. He was a good guest. He was a good guest. So thanks so much for coming on the show. Now, most people would get more for murder than the amount of time that you've spent at HPE. You've obviously done 21 years. You've done a long time. So after sort of spending 20 years at HPE, you were announced as MD of UK, Ireland, and Middle East and Africa. So you must have lived through sort of some of the most exciting times and innovation times of the technology industry. So I think the listeners would love to hear your story. Now, I was looking on your LinkedIn this morning and it said you did an MBA at Henley and then you went straight into service sales. So to tell me how you got sort of kicked in and what inspired you to go into technology.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, you're going back a little bit. My passion when I was younger, when I went to college, was economics. I wanted to be an economist. I was really fascinated by the subject. Applied to go to university. You know, you get into that piece and you sit down and they pull out the UCAS form and you sit there, or UCAS form, and they say, well, okay, where do you want to go? I know what I want to do. Oh, that's fantastic. What's that? I said, well, I want to go to London School of Economics and study economics. They're like, well, great. First choice, fill it in. Okay, second choice. I said, well, what do you mean second choice? I said, I want to go to London School of Economics and study economics. So the net of that was I only applied to LSE. I needed 2 A's and a B. I got 2 B's and a C. Clearly didn't attend college enough as I should have done in my second year. So I decided to take a year out and go to LSE or have another go at LSE for 12 months' time. At the time, I was working in a clothes shop. I spent 3 years, and I'm really, I enjoy fashion, I enjoy clothes, but selling men's suits, which I absolutely loved. So I picked up and sharpened a bit of a taste and flavor for sales. My uncle said to me, if you're taking a year out, get into technology. It's the industry of the future, but most importantly, there's a lot of money to be made. And that kind of resonated with me. I was down in Portsmouth, which is my hometown. I'm a Pompey boy. And there was this apprentice program at IBM. And they were recruiting for kind of young developers, kind of engineers, technical kind of roles. And I didn't see myself doing that, but I saw an opportunity. So I got an interview. I applied, got an interview, walked in, sat there with IBM. And you can imagine this is IBM in the 90s. The desk, there's 3 guys sat behind it. I sort of sit down and they say, okay, tell us why you want to be an engineer at IBM. I said, well, actually, I don't want to be an engineer at IBM, but I want to get into technology. I want to get into sales. And I thought I'd demonstrate my initiative and acumen by securing this interview to tell you about that and see if you could find an opportunity for me at IBM. At which point they flatly rejected me. And it didn't work. So I wrote off to a number of companies. Actually, I ended up getting an opportunity for a company called Interquad Education up in a place called Slough. So aged 18, I moved up lock, stock and barrel, got a bed sit on the Slough trading estate right by the Mars Bar factory, and started on an outbound calling desk selling IT training courses. It was all Novell NetWare in those days. It was all Novell NetWare and fax machines. That's basically how I started.
Wow. And how long did you stay there?
I was there for just over a year. Did quite well, actually. It was a pretty successful time for me. And then I ended up, the next move was I'm in London. So I met meeting some friends in London. And I met this guy in London, friend of a friend, talking about what I did. And he was a sales director for a training company called Key Training Solutions up in the city. And he said, listen, you don't want to be sat on the telephone doing that. Come and work for me. My mum and dad own a pub in Bermondsey, so right in the heart of Millwall. He said, we'll rent you a room above the pub. And we'll give you a role in the field so you can actually go and see customers. So I moved up to London, did that, and that went just ever so well. It was great fun.
So let's talk about your career at HPE then. So where did you start? Did you start engineering or did you get into sales in the end?
Did I start what? Sorry, Mark, say that again.
Engineering or did you get into sales?
No, engineering. So I mean, HP headhunted me. So I did this deal for Key Training with the London Stock Exchange. Phenomenal deal where we did a complete outsource of their training environment. We built a training catalog and we run it. I mean, it was a great deal to do. And there was a lot of HP UX training in there. And as a result of that, I got engaged with HP's education department and helped construct this deal. We did put a lot of business through them that we ultimately resold. And about 4 months later, I got a headhunt on behalf of HP. Would I be interested to go and work in their education business? And at that point in time, I just got married. I had a young baby, and it seemed like a good move. So I moved out of London. I'd had a few years in London. I'd enjoyed myself in London, and it was maybe time to, or I felt I was getting a bit old. Time to settle down a bit. So I moved to Bracknell and moved to HP in the education services business, which really was not the forefront of HP in those days.
So you started your career in education. Then where did you move from there? Did you obviously went into management, I believe.
Well, yeah, no. So I did the education role. Then I managed to expand that to include services. So I took on support renewals and then service upsell. And I got put on a couple of major customers. One of those was Sainsbury's, supermarket retailer. And as I'd been on the account about 6 months, and they did this big outsource with Accenture. So Accenture completely took over the running of Sainsbury's. It was the time when Sainsbury's were playing catch up. So it was a lot of IT investment they were going to do. And what Accenture actually did was they removed the HPE account management team, or they asked for the account management team to be removed. And there was a sort of coincidence of timing, because at that point, HP bought Compaq, if you remember that, which kind of threw everything up in the air. And it was kind of a bit chaotic in many ways. And Accenture called in a senior leader from HP. They asked for the account director to be removed. And I'd formed quite a good relationship with one of the associate partners at Accenture, and they requested that I was made account director. So I was only pretty young at the time, but lots were happening, and it was probably the easy answer for HP. So they put me in as account director for Sainsbury's. I did that for a couple of years, and I mean, we just had a phenomenal time. We won. All the Holborn head office was being built. So we won the end-to-end technology and deployment services for that. We won the stores estate. I end up, right place, right time, great sponsorship from Accenture. I end up getting President's Club 2 years in a row. So my kind of brand was pretty high, and I knew I wanted to go into management, and ultimately went for and got a job running a PC sales team.
Okay. So let's move on a bit up to date. Obviously, you've obviously gone through the ranks. You've obviously got let's talk about the MD role when you took over the UK and Ireland. So how was that? Obviously, getting your first. You'd obviously been man and boy by then. You'd obviously grown up into the role. Got the MD role. How was it then taking over the whole company?
I mean, that was huge for me. I mean, I cannot underemphasize how that felt, how important that was to me. I mean, I set out with a view, as I progressed through management, I did various management roles, loved the company. I thought, I want to be managing director. I really set out to. In fact, it's funny, the day I got the role, the email goes out, it's back in 2016. And I got, you get loads of notes back, and people send you notes and stuff. I got one email that really stood out for me, and it was someone who had been on an intern program at HP, and I have a huge passion for giving young people opportunities and developing talent, just because so many people did it for me. So I used to do a lot of work with our intern communities. I used to spend time with them, do a lot of talks and those sort of things. And someone dropped me a note and they'd said, and they'd done their internship, they'd gone back to university, come back to HP and been in HP about six years. And they said 8 years previously, they had sat in an intern talk that I'd run, and someone had asked me what my ambition was. And I'd said very clearly, I want to be managing director for HP in the UK and Ireland. And they would just sort of had that moment where 8 years later, they see the announcement come out and go, wow.
Yeah.
And that, I had a huge focus on it. It meant the world to me to get that role. I loved getting it. I loved doing it. And there's no better job, I think, in a big company than when you run a major country, right? And the whole country looks to you, particularly when there's things to be done. When I became MD, we had to spin out a PC business. We were HP kind of corporation then, and we were going to do these separations. So I spun out a PC business. We did the separation with the enterprise services or the EDS business, spun out software, and then we bought about 8 companies.
Yeah.
And just being across that and trying to lead through it was amazing experience.
What advice would you give to, you mentioned about developing young talent there. And you obviously set out your stall by saying you were going to become MD. What advice would you give to young apprentices, young graduates who would love to emulate your story, and they've got a passion to sort of say, yeah, I'd like to become, well, obviously when Marc retires, I'd love to become, take over Marc's job. So how do you think people can obviously get up the career ladder like you have done?
Well, there's loads and loads to that particular question. Firstly, focus on the basics. Learn how to listen. It's the most underrated skill, one of the hardest things to do. Don't underestimate the importance of planning. People don't prep. Honestly, people don't prep. It really frustrates me. I prep and plan really hard for things that I do. And you kind of got to work hard. Right, those basics and those fundamentals need to be in place. Then you've got to be smart in terms of how you build the connections and the support to succeed, because you can't succeed on your own. I didn't succeed on my own. I succeeded because a whole bunch of people helped me, guided me, gave me opportunities. But you need to create that for yourself. So, I will always say to young people, contribute. Someone asks you to a meeting, contribute. Don't over contribute. But you're there for a reason, and people's perspective is really valuable. People have different levels of insight depending on their role, and just because someone is senior and 20 years experience, and you are at a more junior role and you've got maybe 12 months experience, does not mean your opinion is any less valid. In some ways, your opinion may be more valid.
Yeah. Okay. So out of your 21 years at HPE, Marc, you've obviously had some highlights and some achievement. What would you say is and you've obviously had some challenges running a business like that. What would you say is your biggest highlight or achievement in your career to date?
Becoming the managing director in the UK and Ireland for HP was huge for me. So that's just a huge personal achievement. When I look more broadly at where we are now, I think what we've achieved culturally around talent development and progression of people within this organization is something I'm just incredibly proud of. When you come into a role like MD and you go, okay, well, you've got to run the business, we've got to execute the plan, we need to do various things. But what's my mandate going to be? Or what am I going to look back on? Or what are people going to look at my time on and really see that we achieved? And I set out that we would build the best development program in the industry for early talent, and we will create the space for that talent to progress in the business and progress and move people quickly. And you look back 5 years on from doing that, 5-6 years on, and it's incredible the people that are coming through. I see leaders in this business that I saw come in as graduates, right, that have the mentality, the heart, the mindset, the culture we want to build. And then on top of that, I've been lucky enough to work in different locations and with communities. And it's something I found very, very positive. It started actually when I was chief of staff. I did a complete rework of our office in Glasgow. right, which was an old manufacturing facility. Right, so we used to, we used to make PCs. Compaq used to make PCs and servers there for all shifted east, and we were going to shut the site down. And I was given it as a bit of a project. Went and spent time up there, talked to people, got engaged with the Scottish government, secured grants and support, and we transformed the site to do some secure government work, but also to be a technology renewal center, right? Where we, as opposed to building technology, we take old technology back, take it apart, renew it, enable it for reuse or recycle. And we saved that site. And subsequently real estate and working with communities has been something that's been top of mind for me. So, recently we have opened a new office in Manchester, which is a huge personal project for me as we kind of re-baselined our employee base in the UK. Really enjoyed that. I've done something similar in Cairo, which has been, massively interesting to go out there and sort of run that play again. And then to see the teams coming in, like young people coming in as we scale out our coverage across the Middle East. And then finally, in terms of achievement, one that I do like and is on a customer level, and there's plenty of great customer stories, but it's the partnership we built with Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, which, I led from the front over many, many years. And, sitting down with the likes of Daniel Levy, when they say, okay, we want to build a stadium which is a clear level above any other stadium on the planet. And we want to do that based on the differentiation of technology. And being at that from the start through to where we got to that stadium going live, to seeing what we've achieved there, that's a big one for me. Tottenham are now officially my second team, Marc.
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan, so we'll move on quickly from that.
I guess it's working out better for me than you at the moment then, but it's pretty marginal. How did both Spurs and Arsenal get invited to the Super League?
That's a miracle. I don't know how that's happened.
Yeah.
You mentioned already sort of nurturing talent and developing talent is obviously a key, close to your heart, because you've been developed through the company yourself, but obviously a key initiative at HPE. How have you achieved that, do you think, or what initiatives have you done to sort of like install it into the company?
Well, it's a multi-year piece of work, right? So you effectively, you need to build a structure and a program, because you can't just bring young people in unless you've actually got a proper program, proper development. And so, that hiring and talent development is incredibly important. But then it's building the culture around how you think about hiring. It's fundamental, because the hiring process and policy at HP when I took over was typically that we would hire primarily on experience. So we would go to someone that's been, IBM, Oracle, Cisco, wherever. They've done sort of 5 years here and there. We'd bring them in. We changed that ethos, and it's something I led, personally sponsored and led, and said, no, what we want to do is we want to develop talent through the organization. So we hire, number one, on capability, like the fundamental attributes that someone has to succeed. Second, we hire on commitment and attitude. How much do they want it? How committed are they to do it? And then thirdly, experience is a bonus. And we therefore create the right leadership structure to hire, to be brave enough to hire like that, to know they'll be supported to hire like that, and who are themselves enabled to coach and develop talent. That way you can move people through the organization. One of the things that happened in 2017, when we finished the separations, was we did a transformation of the company. We completely reset the structure. We removed Europe. We took out a load of cost, because we went from this big conglomerate to this smaller Hewlett-Packard enterprise company. And when I led through that, and when we made the decisions, we made the decisions to step up people. So in 2017, pretty much everyone in the UK and I leadership team was stepping up. A lot of senior people left, and we stretched everyone, and it kind of bound a bunch of people together. But part of that was our culture around giving opportunity and giving people a chance to step up. And, I've never done a job. In fact, every job I've done, including this one, when I've taken it on, people have always said, well, maybe it's a little bit soon. Probably it's come a little bit early, but we're going to give you the opportunity. That's our culture. Right? People talk about culture. Culture is the way you do things, right? And that starts from the mindset and the value set of the leaders. Talent development and giving opportunity in that way has been so personally important for me. And I've lived that and demonstrated it and proven it, that it's become an embedded value of HPE, which is why, frankly, I think we've got the culture we've got today.
That's great. It's great, Marc.
But also, obviously, we still do look after the old guard. I mean, look at Mark Armstrong, as you said.
You'll love hearing that.
Can we cut that? No, don't cut that.
No, keep that in. We'll keep that in. Marc, most of my previous guests on the channel chat so far have been aligned to running a UK business. Now, you've run a UK business, obviously. Yep. However, you've both run country and international teams. So what would you say is sort of the key challenges or differences of running a territory opposed to a sort of single country?
Yeah, so my role got expanded in 2019, which frankly was something I was pushing for anyway. I wanted to further test and develop myself. I'd been in the company a long time. I'd been very UK centric. Obviously, Ireland as well, but it's a big UK business. And I was pushing for expansion. I thought they were going to give me Northern Europe. And I went to dinner with the chief sales officer and he said, listen, we're going to give you the Middle East. I was like, okay, wow. Because actually they felt there was a cultural fit. It's been such an impactful experience personally and incredibly valuable. I've enjoyed spending time in different places and you learn a lot about yourself and about other people. My focus country, I'm an exec sponsor for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So pre-lockdown, I was in Riyadh every month. That country has a lot of judgment on it. People judge. It's incredible, the judgment, the prejudice that you see. And you get out to Riyadh and you meet people and you see the transformation they're having socially and economically out there. And what that means on the ground, it's an incredible experience. So that's been really great for me. The flip, or coming back to your questions, you start to get slightly disaggregated, don't you? Because you kind of become regional. Yeah. So number one, you need to find a way to really defend your time with customers because you don't want to be back office. And I'm so customer centered, right? So that's a really important fact. But then one of the things I think a lot about is the value cost equation of what you do, right? So the things that I do, and it's the unintended consequence. I can make a comment on a call and it can lead to about 8 hours of work for various people across the organization. And maybe I didn't even really mean it, And so you've got to be really, really conscious of that. And I think about whatever we're doing at the geography level, we call it a geography. Is that valuable or is it cost to the organization? And I particularly measure that in terms of time. So I hold myself massively accountable to taking time from the organization, especially internally. So when you think about the balance between governance and coaching and how you operate, I think that's one of the big differences. When you run a big country, you're sort of, you are the country, you're in it, you're around it, you're not kind of governing it so much in the same way. And I think the key to it is, it's the same with any role. You need the right leaders. Job number one is the leadership team underneath you, around you, are vital to the success. Those leaders then need to understand the framework of how decisions are being made and the kind of end state you're going for. Not maybe the route map and every single decision point, but what we're trying to achieve. And then the guiding principles or the values that we use to make decisions. Then once that's established, you put decision-making as close as possible to customers. Your proximity of decision-making is fundamental and vital. And then you back and empower your leaders to deliver that. But the hard bit is stepping one away, particularly from the UK, because you need to create the time to go and do the other stuff. But also as people progress within that UK business, you kind of got to give them the space.
Marc, would you say, once you've mentioned there about customers and you like close customers, and you're obviously started in sales career yourself. I think the listeners will be interested in hearing, I know there's no typical day in your sort of role, but are you very much still customer centric? Are you still seeing customers all the time, or are you doing more strategy?
No, I do a lot of customers. So one of the roles, one of the great things about my job is you can kind of get the structure of the organization. I've always had, since I've been managing director, a role which is an early career role. So it's not a senior or expensive role. It's an early career development role for my customer management. So I have somebody, it's a lady called Philippa Thomas at the moment. Before that, it was Zoe Sweet, who went on to ultimately be my chief of staff, who helped set up this session. And what Philippa does is tracks my executive sponsor list. So every customer I'm exec sponsor for, I'm actively engaged with, not just with the customer, but with the team in terms of account planning and account development. We will aim to do at least 6 customer sessions a week. And what Philippa will do is ensure I've got a proper preparation document, because when you're doing that amount of customer work plus everything else, you haven't got time to go and do the prep yourself. So she does my prep on that. I then am prepped and briefed for the meeting. And then we will have a call. We typically have 2 to 3 calls a week where we go through my follow-up. And she then helps manage all of my follow-ups. Those customer meetings are followed up within 48 hours. I mean, if you just look at today, right, I've got 3 customer meetings today. Well, I'm straight from this. I'm in with Mercedes F1 in a session there. I'm with a financial services hedge fund, quantitative analytics company at around 11:30. And then I'm out to Dammam, right, because I'm with Saudi Aramco this afternoon. So it just gives a sense of how I think about it.
Keeps you busy, and Zoe keeps you busy by the sounds of it, Marc.
Well, it keeps you sharp as well, right? You know, if you're not learning stuff so much internally. You learn what's going on by talking to customers and asking the right questions and listening well.
Yeah, no, great advice. Marc, in a recent interview, you mentioned, although you were sort of proud of HPE's attitude to sort of flexible working and your preference, but you sort of mentioned your preferences when people are in the office, because it sort of creates energy and the collaboration, and that's where the sort of the ideas and the magic happens, and it's quite valuable. What is going to be your approach as lockdown restrictions end? Because I did hear about an initiative, or you can maybe give the listeners a bit more about edge to office. You know, is that something you're doing at the moment?
It absolutely is something we're doing. So, yeah, I don't really enjoy the early train into London any more than most people. But I do enjoy interaction and both a collaborative perspective in terms of working. And these video calls are great, but it's not the same as being around people. You sort of spark off people. And I feel that, you know, I see certain people less in the current environment. You know, when I joined HP, I was given a book on day one called The HP Way by Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard. And you know, back in the 90s, every new employee got that. And they talked a lot about management by walking around, just like talking to people and seeing people. And I used to practice that a lot. I did it a few times, actually. I remember once going down into the restaurant and decided I'm just going to go and sit next to someone. And there was this kind of a couple of young people that I didn't really know in the business. And I'm managing director. This is, you know, a few years back. I go and sit down, and they looked at me like it's the most horrific thing. But I do think there's a lot in that. However, edge to office is, you know, I think I'm really pleased the company is leading with this program. So it's removed the concept of working from home. You work at the edge where I am now, my home, or you go into the office. But if you go into the office, you're planning your time a bit more. You don't go in there to sit at a desk. And that enables us to recut and reconfigure our offices. I mean, luckily, I'm getting to open 2 new offices that we've done during lockdown. One in Manchester, one in Winnersh, and we've designed those offices to be collaboration spaces. Yeah. The working areas are less banks and banks of big fixed desks. You've got long extended collaboration tables where people can go in, drop out. And I envisage people coming in a couple of days a week, but also then taking time to work from home. I mean, I aim to go into London a couple of days a week when I'm in the UK. But when I'm in London, I don't want to sit doing internal reviews and calls with the US. That is to see customers and to spend time with people in the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing about edge to office, by the way, is it creates opportunity for different people to work at a company, because you get away from this need to be based in the city. I mean, a great example of that right now is in Ireland. So in Ireland, we announced 2 weeks ago 150 technology jobs in Ireland, primarily around cyber, but also around consumption service development. But because of edge to office, you don't need to live in Dublin to do those jobs. And when we announced that, I mean, that really has been quite impactful in Ireland, and certainly got quite a big reaction. And let's think about it like that. You can ultimately have much more flexibility. And we will go for that flexibility because it gives you talent attraction and talent retention. It just shapes up this culture.
Yeah. Diversity, Marc, massive topic at the moment, huge topic. It's been talked about on the channel for the last 24 months, but it's really come to fruition in the last 12 months about the lack of diversity. How much do you think the lack of diversity in the technology industry is a problem?
I think lack of diversity anywhere is, I think about less as a problem, more of an opportunity. Is certainly my sense of it. Listen, the stats don't lie. So there is not huge diversity within the industry. However, I think there's incredible progression being made, particularly on gender diversity. Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you look at the big tech companies in the UK, I think maybe a majority now are led, with a female leader, which just goes to show the progress that's been made, particularly on gender diversity. And I think there's so many efforts being made by so many people, so many good programs that we're making good progression. These things take time to feed through, but I think on gender diversity, we don't claim success, but we definitely claim great progress. I think diversity is more broad than just gender. Yeah. And, I think there's certainly work to do across the spectrum of diversity, which, again, you can't categorize into one area. I mean, one of the big areas I got my eyes opened on recently was around disability. And I think disability is still one of the big taboo topics. As much progress as we've made on kind of gender or with Black Lives Matter or even just across the board, really, LGBT would be another good example. Disability is still not really talked about enough or much. And people assume disability is very visible and they don't realize that quite often it's invisible. And that manifests the way in which people behave, which can lead to people being judged. And I think, so there's this huge progress across all areas been made, but certainly further we can go. And I think it opens up opportunities for innovation, opens up opportunities for growth when you have a diverse leadership team. One of the things I learned, by the way, on diversity, I read a book called The Power of Quiet, really interesting book, which kind of sort of said, some people are introverted, and that's not a bad thing. And then I thought about myself, this is self-awareness, because inclusion comes down, good leadership on inclusion comes down to self-awareness. And I'd realized I'd spent years trying to make people that were introverted extrovert because I thought it was better, right? Try and teach them to be confident because I thought it was better. How narrow is that, right? But really that's not what it's about. You don't want to change the way people operate because that's how they're creative and have ideas. You just need to give people a safe space and bring them into a conversation in a different way and actually control the tendency, which we have, which is to favor people that look like us. I mean, I suddenly realized, how much kind of confirmation bias I had or attraction bias where I just wanted to hire people that were kind of salesy, confident and had good chat. And then I built a leadership team and looked around and they all looked a bit like that. And I realized probably missing something.
No, absolutely. Can you sort of share with some of the listeners any sort of initiatives that you've got at HPE that you do to sort of try and tackle the diversity problem?
Well, I think programs are great in as far as they go, right? And people do run programs and we're running programs. But I think it's more fundamental than that if you really want to fix, and because it's about inclusion, right? Diversity is an outcome from inclusion. If you have an inclusive environment where people feel safe and feel supported, then you will ultimately start to build a diverse workforce. And you need to think about it that way, which comes back to this point on culture, like the way we do things in the business. I look back to the hiring approach we've taken and the development of people. And I do believe we've built an organization that is centered around a core set of values that's pretty inclusive. And that is how you start to ingrain progression on diversity over time. So I think that's the big step we've made. Then it's the role of leaders, right? Because leaders need to be self-aware, right? Self-aware leaders who understand the impacts of what they say, how they behave on others is fundamental to getting inclusion. So there's a lot of education to be done there, and that's certainly an area we focused a lot on. But then leading by example. I'll give you an example of that, right? So I'll give you a couple on self-awareness. So I used to work for a guy called Andy Isherwood. You might have heard of Andy Isherwood. Phenomenal leader. I mean, honestly, coached, developed me, gave me loads of opportunities. Speak to him regularly now, and he's a great guy. His style was what I would call kind of like the invincible leader, right? So Andy, he worked harder than everyone else. He worked longer than everyone else. He asked more difficult questions. He was more direct. I mean, he was just kind of invincible. And I sort of aspired to that. When I worked for Andy, he would call me most days. He knew I got up early. He'd call me, 7 a.m., 7:30, discussion about the business. This was kind of how he operated. And I sort of got into that. As I stepped up and took on a big leadership role, I replicated it, right? So I used to call my team 8 o'clock, 8:30. What are you doing today? Have you seen the market share data? Have you seen this news that's out? And not, I mean, as I look back on that now, calling people at 8 o'clock in the morning and saying that stuff, not only is that horrific now in terms of, now I'm a bit more self-aware, right? Just how hard that is. But I used to wear it as a badge of honor. So I used to tell people I did it. Like, I'm a great leader. I call my team at 8 a.m. and ask them what's happening. And then you kind of wonder why no one with a family wants to work for you. Right? But that's, it's things like that, this inclusion. And if you can kind of learn from that and then tell those stories, I never call anyone before 9 o'clock. Unless, there's planned set up calls. I just wouldn't do it anymore. Or after 6, unless there's a real emergency, right? Unless it's ultra urgent or critical. So that's self-awareness and leading by example, I think is fundamental.
Yeah. So over the last 12 months, obviously the pandemic has affected everyone. But it's been quite good. It's been quite, without being distasteful, it's been quite, most IT companies done quite well. Personally, Marc, for you, what are the lessons you've learned about yourself and about the business in the last 12 months around lockdown?
Well, I learned how to deliver a baby.
All right.
It's a big one. I think, what have I learned? The importance of being local, or how much I value being local, and the importance of family. I know it sounds kind of quite obvious, but you don't realize until you spend time in a different way. I would say I learned how to deliver a baby. I mean, I had a son during lockdown, and as it transpires, I mean, we were trying not to go into the hospital, right? Because you get separated, and it's like, let's wait as long as possible, and these things take time, and before you know it, I'm on the phone to 999. I can see the head, and I did at home on my, with my partner, with Morwenna, I delivered the baby. And the funny thing about that, actually, is you sort of do that. You deliver this baby, and they were great. The 999 responder team were great, and she was fantastic. She was delighted because it's a big thing for them if they talk someone through delivering a baby.
Yeah, well. Absolutely. Kind of,
but then afterwards, so kind of Morwenna's been through this kind of labor. She's given birth at home. She's produced this baby. And everyone's like, oh, Marc, you did an amazing job. You delivered the baby. I'm like, well, I'll take the credit, but really it was, I played cricket when I was younger, and it's a bit like fielding in the slips, right? It's just, whereas she's delivered the actual baby, and I credit. So, so what have I learned during lockdown? I think I would say, one important fact is that life goes on, and the sun sets and the sun rises every single day. So take the time, look up, look to the horizon, look to the future, and get set. And I also think I would say, I've learned that we can really reimagine how we work. I talked about edge to office, reimagine our business, reimagine how we interact, how we disrupt. And, I certainly take that forward, but it's key to be focused, and it's key to be positive.
Yeah, absolutely. My last question, Marc, you've been a fabulous guest, but my last question for you, you've achieved so much in your career today. And obviously you mentioned about, getting the UK MD role, and that must have been the highlight of your career. But what are your future ambitions, sort of personally and for the company?
Oh, future ambitions. I mean, I want to be happy, happiness. And balance, right? Getting real balance, I think, is an ambition, is a goal for me on a personal level. I want to continue to be challenged and develop. But with those things in mind, I think you become more rounded, don't you, about what's important. Certainly, a balance of time is a real ambition for me, maybe in a way that I didn't achieve in my younger years, which you know, I put my professional career above my personal family commitments many times. And I think there's an ambition to have a self-awareness and a discipline to maybe do that less whilst still hopefully enjoying success. I mean, on a professional level, I love Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I absolutely love this company. You know, people say to me, why are you still at HPE? You've been there 21 years. Maybe you should go to this company, go to that company. Like that's the thing now in technology. You need to jump around companies. I'm like, what? Yeah. You know, I'm not sure I totally need to do that to be challenged. I love the company. And it's a great company with a great heritage, a great culture, a great heart. However, let's be honest with ourselves, right? I'm nothing if not direct. We've missed a couple of big market transitions. You know, honestly, I mean, HP could have dominated so many markets. I mean, Apple iPhones, I used to have something called an iPack. Some of your listeners will have had iPacs. It was way ahead, you know, and yeah, HP missed the transition, and you can go through a number of them. I am determined that we will win the next set of market transitions. When you think about platform as a service, as a good example of that, when you think about data platforms, which is a real kind of market transition that's happening right now. My big ambition is that we lead HPE to disrupt markets, to take share, and really, really establish this company in the minds of so many people as being great again. We were one of the founders. We were the founder of Silicon Valley. This company is on the path to greatness, and it's a huge ambition for me to lead it there, and then to celebrate with a whole set of great people in the organization when we get there.
Marc, you've been a fabulous guest. Thanks so much for your time.